Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Bob Woodward has written over 20 best-selling books spanning key points of basically every presidency in his life and career, as you see on your screen. It's really something. He spoke to Trump many times for his more recent reporting. There's a lawsuit, actually, that came out of that. His groundbreaking reporting with Bernstein on the Watergate scandal, of course, is part of what ultimately led to President Nixon's historic resignation. And he joined us recently about his new book, War, which deals with the wars and Middle East, as you see on the cover, everyone from Biden and Harris to Trump and Bibi Netanyahu and Putin. On this historic week, we are joined by Bob Woodward. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
What do you see in the election results?
Well, Trump won. He's going to become, in about 75 days, commander-in-chief. As we know, commander-in-chief has extraordinary power under our Constitution and under the practice. As president, he could decide, oh, I'm going to send 10,000, 50,000 troops to a certain area or a certain country. In a practical sense, a president decides to almost declare war. The situation we're in now, I think it's important to think about avoiding catastrophes because the world is very volatile. It is a truly dangerous place. And how will a President Trump exercise that? You just go through the Middle East, the Ukraine war, what's going on in Asia, Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, who's one of the most volatile figures on the international stage, has an amazing arsenal of nuclear weapons that are hidden and buried and concealed and separated. Kim Jong-un now has made a partnership with Russia, and there's evidence that some of the troops from North Korea are going to aid Russia in the fight in Ukraine. Some people have said, I think with good reason, if we're going to get that many players involved in a violent war or almost war, we are close to we are edging toward some kind of World War III, and we damn well better be worried about it. I think we need to focus on is what is settled. Trump is going to be commander-in-chief and have that extraordinary power in a world. I mean, look what's going on in the Middle East. Look what's going on in the Ukraine war. And you go around the globe, and I'm really, really interested, and I think we all should be, who is Trump going to pick as his Secretary of State? Very importantly, his defense secretary. One of the things I found in my reporting this summer, Secretary of Defense Austin is really the hidden star in the Biden administration, did some very specific, pointed things to make sure that we protected the country. Can I bore you with just reading briefly one of them? Because in this detail, much hangs. So Austin called the Russian defense minister, Shoigu, and this is October 2022, and said, we know you are contemplating the use of tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Now, that's based on extraordinary intelligence. Austin laid out a case, which I have in the book, about why nuclear weapons should not be used. I think he made a compelling case. And Shoigu, after hearing that, took it very personally, or at least for Russia, and he said, I don't take kindly to being threatened. And Austin, I think, in one of the more remarkable, strong exchanges, said to Shoigu, Mr. Minister, I am the leader of the most powerful military in the history of the world. I don't make threats. Of course, he was making that threat, and Russia has not used tactical nuclear weapons, and I think that was a fact. Now, the question for us, who's going to be Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense? Is it going to be somebody like Austin? When I took a transcript of this call he had with the Russian defense minister to Austin and started reading it, he didn't know I had it, and to my surprise, he said, that's accurate. That's accurate. He confirmed it, and that, as you know, in reporting on particularly national security issues, that's very rare.
How do you think the press should approach the second term, given everything we know that on the one hand is a little different than other presidents, to say the least, but on the other still involves the foundation of facts and an open mind, not rushing to know what comes next?
Exactly, and it's got to be reported very, very aggressively, and we need to address the question. I've spent a lot of time on this. Who is Donald Trump? I first interviewed him 35 years ago when he was a real estate operator in New York City with Carl Bernstein, my Watergate reporting partner. And we asked Trump about, why are you doing something in a real estate deal? And it's taped with his permission. He just says, instinct. I went back over some interviews I did with Trump while he was president in 2019, the next to last year of his presidency, and a question came up about North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and who was threatening the United States and Trump. And Trump incredibly said, well, if he shoots, he shoots. And I asked, well, aren't you worried? Are you trying to drive him to the bargaining table? And Trump was incredibly dismissive. And then he went back to this question of instincts. Now, instincts are very personal, and interestingly and importantly, they are hidden from other people. I can say my instinct tells me to do X or Y. It's not accessible information to you, and you see Trump relying on this. What are the instincts?
But let me push you a little, Bob.
Sure, please.
How much should people pick up from where the last term ended? You factor in what you know about this leader who talks about the press as the enemy, who closed his campaign, referencing the shooting, the horrific shooting at him, and saying, oh, you could shoot through the press. How much do you pick up on that point and continue, and how much do you say, wait a minute, new president, let's see what happens?
But that's Trump, and I'm sorry to persist on this question of instinct, because it gives him or anyone a cover for why they're really doing things. And one of the number of things over the years I've learned about Trump, he actually rarely has a plan. He doesn't really have a team. I think you need a team to be president, and you really need to kind of telegraph what you're doing and where you're going, and that's not Donald Trump. So we are in a period of uncertainty, I would argue danger. My dealings with him the last year he was president, in the year 2000 was the year of the coronavirus, and I did 19 interviews with him, 9 hours, and it turned out he was warned that the virus was coming and he covered it up, and he lied about it, and he concealed from the American people what he knew. If you look at what happened in that year in his own words, it is appalling. At 1.1 million people died of that virus. When there was one case in the United States, January 28th, the year 2020, Trump was given all the warnings from experts, national security experts. I interviewed, I said, what are you going to do? What's the plan? And he kept, oh, well, don't worry, I'll come up with one. In the middle of the summer, incredibly, I asked him on July 20th, 140,000 people had died of the virus that you were warned about. What's your plan now? And he said, this is almost unbelievable. You hear it on a tape. He said, well, I'll have a plan in 106 days. That's election day.
Yeah.
He's only thinking about election, not the job
Right,
he
and
has.
I think your reporting is striking on that. And now, under the Constitution, he has no more elections to run.